In the up-and-coming absolutely hilarious R-rated comedy Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates, Adam Devine and Zac Efron star as hard-partying brothers who place an online ad to find the perfect dates for their sister's wedding in Hawaii. Hoping for a wild getaway, the boys instead find themselves outsmarted and outpartied by the uncontrollable duo played by Anna Kendrick and Aubrey Plaza. And Fox is letting you see it early for free. Just go to gofobo.com/MikeDavePodcast1 to grab passes to a screening near you. I'm going to repeat that line. Just go to gofobo.com/MikeDavePodcast1 to grab passes to a screening near you. The hijinks that ensue have to be seen to be believed. It has a great supporting cast as well, with Sam Richardson from Veep and Stephen Root. Based on a true story, this movie will have you laughing all the way to the end. It's in theaters July 8th, but again, you can see it early and for free. Get passes to an advanced screening at gofobo.com/MikeDavePodcast1. That's gofobo.com/MikeDavePodcast1. gofobo.com/MikeDavePodcast1.
The following program is a podcast1.com production.
From Hollywood, California, by way of the Broken Skull Ranch, this is the Steve Austin Show.
Give me a hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
Now, here's Steve Austin.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Steve Austin Show. I am coming to you from the mean streets of Los Angeles, California today. I'm sitting here in my office at 316 Gimmick Street. Today is Monday. It is a holiday. Reason it's a holiday is because it's Memorial Day. So right now, I would like to pay my respects and give honor to all of those folks who died while serving this country in the name of freedom for our country, fighting in our armed forces. So much respect, honor to all of you who served. Thank you for the freedom. Allow me to sit here in this chair and flap my gums on a microphone and do all the other things I do. You paid the ultimate price. Respect. Hey, man, I got a chance to go out to Agua Dulce the other day and get on my Kawasaki Mule Pro FXT and take a couple of laps at a real easy pace. Drove down there and got my mule, old Buck, out of the storage container, fired him right up, fired up, fuel-injected motor, battery life is good, and I got on that damn buggy and took a couple of laps around that property over there, and I just took it easy, riding at a snail's pace. Didn't want to jar my shoulder. I'm still on the mend from my shoulder surgery a couple of weeks ago, but it was good to get out there in the desert, out on that mountaintop, and see that place where we shoot the Broken Skull Challenge with all the obstacles not in place, and just ride around and getting the beauty of those mountains out there and getting some fresh air. I actually took me I didn't say a picnic lunch, but I had a lunch out there with me. I popped the tailgate on old Buck and put my food out there and my water, and had a little picnic out there eating with Buck. I fired up my little Kawasaki KLX 450 and ran that thing for a while to charge the battery up on it. That being a motorcycle, there's no way I could ride that with my shoulder being in a sling and the horsepower that thing generates, but nonetheless, I was able to get out there and charge all the batteries to my equipment and put old Buck in the wind and get a little joyride. Didn't go crazy on him. But all the things for me are going good. The shoulder continues to come along real nicely. Range of motion exercises started, just moving my shoulder around. I'm not to lift it yet. They do all the work for me, and then they put the ice pack on there. So looking forward to making my comeback. I'm going to fire up that Survivor song, Eye of the Tiger. Y'all remember it from the Rocky movies. It's one of the most inspirational songs of all time. So I got that soundtrack riding. I got that soundtrack rolling on a loop inside my head as I make my comeback. Training with the left side of my body. I'm able to work legs now, and I'm doing cardio. So the kid is back in action. Couple more weeks, maybe a month or so before, 2 months before I can really use that right arm to do anything. But it's coming along nicely. I've gotten so many emails and questions about how I'm doing. The wing is doing just fine, and the kid is healing up, and I'll be back better than ever ASAP. Hey, man, I tell you what, I asked you guys to send in some stuff for me to watch, and y'all turned me on to Bloodline. I think last time I told you to watch something, I think I pronounced it plural and called it Bloodlines. Anyway, if you don't know, you should know. They just released season 2. And I binge watched the hell out of that season 1. Last time I talked to you guys, I was on episode 4. In about 4 days, I caught up. And now I think I'm 3 deep. Tonight will be episode 4 on season 2. And I'll tell you what, I'm not going to give you guys any spoilers, but the tide has changed. The momentum has shifted. Sissy SpaceX character is in a completely different mindset on this season, and I won't tell you why, but man, I tell you what, Kyle Chandler continues to knock it out of the park. I won't say anything else about it because I don't want to give anything away. But anyway, I'm just telling you, if you haven't started watching Bloodline Season 1, you got to start watching it. If you get invested in the first episode or you start watching that first episode and you're thinking, hey, Steve, this is a little slow, just stick with it, man. The writing to this show is just off the charts. All of the performances from all of the characters is just supreme. I'm digging it the most. I'm deep into, or I got a good start on season 2 now, and I'm enjoying the hell out of it. My only fear is this. When I get to the end of season 2, and they just released this, I'm probably going to be jonesing for season 3, and that's the way it always happens. So anyway, check that show out, and if you got another good show for me to watch, send it to questions@steveaustonshow.com and give a brother a heads up. For me, though, I'm recommending to you, if you ain't seen Bloodline, check it out. It's badass, and it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. Anyway, hey, folks, I got a hell of a guest today for you that I really enjoyed talking to, and I've been looking forward to talking to this guy for a long time. My guest today is Cowboy Johnny Mantell. I know a lot of people that listen to this show are from the younger generation and might not remember Cowboy Johnny Mantell from his wrestling days, but I do. And I started talking with Johnny when I got inducted into the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. And every time he would call and check in on me to see if I was going to be able to make it to the ceremony or not in Wichita Falls, Texas, because of my shoulder, one thing would lead to another, and we just start talking about the business. So I said, man, I called old Johnny up, and I said, would you mind being on my podcast? I said, I would just love to talk to you and shoot the breeze, like two guys talking shop. I'm not sitting here with a bunch of notes in front of me. It's just conversation. And Cowboy Johnny Mantell had almost a 30-year run in the business. He was a highly respected veteran who held many championships. He was a pro's pro. And in doing my research, I knew that he had come across JBL, Bradshaw, one of the announcers. You know what? He used to be in the ring. You remember him from the Clothesline from Hell, and you see him on Monday Night Raw all the time. And just to check in on Johnny Mantell, because I knew he was an influence on JBL, I texted JBL and I said, hey, man, I'm talking to Johnny Mantell today. Did he help / influence your career? And JBL texted back, hey, Steve, yes. Worked with Johnny a lot. He usually was in a tag team with Black Bart, and Bart would always yell and complain, ribbon on the square about Duncan and me being so stiff, and Johnny would just be calm. He'd call us over and explain what could have been better. He was a really good heel and a great guy. Love him. We were awful, and Johnny never lost patience. He's a true pro. And that's exactly what I picked up when I was talking to Johnny, just in conversation and watching his matches on YouTube, because he's 58 years old, so he's like a generation, almost a generation ahead of me. And in talking to him, the guy's such a good storyteller. I just sit there and listen to the guy tell stories, and I just stay out of the way. He was a great guy to talk to. And we talk on this podcast for about an hour and 20 minutes, give or take. I'm going to do a part 2 next week. We had some technology problems in the beginning of this podcast. We were doing a video Skype, but his signal down there in Texas was a little weak. So then we went to audio Skype, and there's just a little bit of audio discombobulation, but I think we get it together for the most part, and we had to pick it up in a couple of places, but bear with me if there's any technical difficulties. I have not listened to the conversation back, but I enjoyed talking to Johnny about the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame over there in Wichita Falls, of which he is the president. Just enjoyed talking with him about his career. And when we talk again for part 2, we'll get into how hot the Von Erichs were, some Andre the Giant stories, life on the road, how he kept his nose clean, so to speak, no pun intended, through all the years that he was in the business. You know, he'll have a good reason how he did stay clean, and he's going to explain that next week. And then we're going to get into some road stories and some more technical questions in part 2. But for now, sit back and enjoy this conversation between two veterans who have respect for each other. Sit here and shoot the breeze and talk about the game, the business, the life of professional wrestling. Before I get to Johnny Mantell, you know I got to take care of business, and I got one more thing to tell you about, and that is the resurrection of Jake the Snake, the documentary, is finally out on DVD on Blu-ray. That's right. The Jake the Snake documentary is out on DVD and Blu-ray. And this is the badass story about how Jake the Snake Roberts turned his life around. I don't know if I can say it. This is the badass story about how Jake the Snake turned his life around with the help of Diamond Dallas Page and DDP Yoga. If you haven't seen the documentary at one of the screenings that Dallas hosted last fall, you should still get the DVD because Dallas and his crew put a ton of extras in the DVD. Listen to this, folks. If you saw the original movie, on the DVD, there are over 20 bonus features, including commentary by Dallas, Jake Roberts, and director Steve Yu. Now, I've seen this documentary a few times now, and it gets me every time. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen, and I've gone on record in saying that. It's a badass, incredible story, and yes, it happens to be very, very true. And if you haven't seen it, then you need to. It ain't a wrestling documentary. This is one man's journey to turn his life around. And I tell you what, when you talk about turning his life around, this dude was so far down Bad Street USA, dire straits, whatever. But see him turn his life around, reconnect with his family, and restart his legendary career. If you ain't seen it, you need to, because if it does anything, it will inspire you to start living a healthier life yourself. And you can do that with DDP Yoga and the DDP Yoga Now app. Listen, Dallas has made it even easier for you to get on the DDP Yoga program. The app lets you do workouts right from your phone, wherever you are, whenever you want. And you can even access live workouts from the DDP Yoga Performance Center from the app. And, of course, it's loaded up with great nutrition tips, recipes, cooking demonstrations. Folks, if you need something to get you healthy, this is the ticket. And right now, you can get 3 free months of the DDP Yoga Now app when you buy the DDP Yoga program at ddpyoga.com/Austin. Folks, one more time, I'm telling you, Dallas is giving you guys everything you need, and he's giving you a special deal. Just go to ddpyoga.com/Austin to take advantage of it. As Dallas always says, all you have to do to start living a healthier life is commit to the program. And now, thanks to the app, committing became even easier. You can do DDP Yoga wherever you are, whenever you want. So get started now at ddpyoga.com/Austin. Use the promo code Austin316 and get 10% off. And that's the bottom line, 'cause I said so. Austin316, promo code 10% off. Get it.
The Steve Austin Show. The Steve Austin Show.
All right, here we go. I got Cowboy Johnny Mantell laughing on the other end of the phone. I was talking to Johnny yesterday about doing this podcast, two veterans of the squared circle, shooting the breeze and talking shop. And I told Johnny, I said, hey, man, you want to call this thing or you going to let me call it? And normally the heel calls the match. And Johnny said, Steve, since it's your show, I'll let you call it. But if you get lost, I might chip in and guide you along the way. So anyway, I'm talking to a guy who had a hell of a run, got into business about 1976, got out of the business in about 2005. And we're not going to really cover an agenda type thing, a chronological. I think we'll probably just take some chronological steps as we progress through his career, but talk about some of the steps along the way and talk about some of the new nuances, some of the, we're not going to say trade secrets, just as far as working underneath the hood, because that's what Johnny did at one point in his career, and just the mechanics of a pro wrestler and some different personalities and characters that he crossed paths with. But anyway, without any further ado, my guest today, Cowboy Johnny Mantell, coming from, well, he's the pride of Montague County. Johnny, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Steve, for having me today. It's an honor to be on here with you and just to get to talk shop. Like I said, we mentioned, maybe we're just going to think we're hopping into a car after making Saturday TV in Shreveport, working in the Mid-South territory, and now we got to drive to Jackson, Mississippi. So we got about 3.5 or a 4-hour drive to kill, and so we're going to talk about everything that we talk about on one of those kind of trips.
You got it. And we're going to talk about your career and some of the people you cross paths with and some of the dealings of the inner workings of a squared circle, because you, of all people, have almost damn near 3 decades in the business. But I want to start off with the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, which is based out of Wichita Falls, Texas. Are you still down there in Bowie in Montague County?
I sure am. I'm 42 minutes from the hall. It's a good compression time to get geared up for the day, and it's a good uncompression day at the end of the day to get stuff lined up for the next day. And we're really proud that the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame has moved from upstate New York to Wichita Falls, Texas, where it now calls its home, and it will be from this point forward. We're just really proud to have it right here in our back door.
Well, man, I'm really proud to be a part of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame. And the thing about this Hall of Fame, it's the only brick-and-mortar Hall of Fame for wrestling in existence, meaning brick and mortar, meaning it's an actual physical place that people can go by and see and visit. And Johnny, over the course of this year, by hook or by crook, and I don't know when it's going to be, right now, as I said last week on the podcast, I really felt bad that I couldn't make it down there to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. I'm nursing this wing. I canceled everything I got going to get this wing back in shape so I can get about making a living and paying my bills. But I'm going to get down there, and I'd like to take a tour of the facility with you and maybe do another podcast and talk about some of the stuff you guys have got in there. I guess the question that I have for you is, out of all the people, how did they come to Cowboy Johnny Mantell to be the president of the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame now that it's moved down to Wichita Falls?
Well, this whole project started back in 1999, and a gentleman by the name of Tony Villano started a group up there with sort of after visiting with Georgie Animal Steel and Ray Apollo, who was Doink the Clown, and Davey O'Hannon and Gene Lewis, and a group of wrestlers that he sort of befriended as he was a state athletic commissioner for the state of New York. He got to be pretty good friends with a group of the wrestlers, and I think something over some kind of bottle of alcohol, and all of them talking about what happens to your stuff when you retire or you quit. And everybody's answer was, well, it goes to a basement or an attic or goes someplace, and it just sort of gets forgotten about. And he said, well, there should be a Hall of Fame and museum that, always honors and keeps the history of wrestling alive. And hence the start of the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame back in 1999. And throughout the years in upstate New York, it really, they gave birth to it. They taught it to crawl, and they got it walking in a pretty good pace, but they needed that next level. They needed a town and a city and a community that wanted to embrace it and sort of take ownership of it and make it get to that next level. And fortunately, about 2 years ago, the group in New York asked my wife and I to sort of search the middle of the country someplace so it could be more easily accessed by fans from around the country and the world. And so we looked and got around to different cities, and it just kept coming back to Wichita Falls, that they wanted it. They needed something like this in their town. And the cities themselves, the city itself had their own TV station. So being in the Metroplex in Dallas-Fort Worth, you'd have to fight coverage time with the Rangers and the Mavs and the Cowboys and all their sports teams. And we've been very blessed in Wichita Falls. When we do something, the TV stations come out. They come out in full force to check us out and see what's going on. And it's really been a great experience, Steve, to be involved with it.
Hey, man, how do people go about getting, I know where Wichita Falls is, it's the northern part of Texas, but when is the Hall of Fame open, and how many people you guys get to go through there to see all the stuff that you've got together?
Well, of course, we took advantage of WWE being in Texas this year for WrestleMania, so we got the museum open the week of WrestleMania. We had 1,007 people come through the doors the first week from 5 different countries and like 12 or 13 states. And it's been really good ever since then. We've had people coming through the doors every day. We're open Tuesday through Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday from 10 to 6, Friday and Saturdays from 10 to 7, and Sundays from 1 to 5. And we really want people to come and learn the history of professional wrestling. We have stuff that dates all the way back to the Civil War, and we have belts from the 20s, and we have outfits from all kinds of people in the hall being displayed as we speak.
You know, the thing I like about the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame is the fact that it's not affiliated with any other organization or federation. Wrestling, otherwise, it stands independent. You guys have a board of directors. You got your voting committee. How do y'all go about selecting the individuals that go into each class? And I'll reference this 2016 class in the Pioneer era from 1865 to 42. Earl McCready and Joe Pazendak went in. International Division, Peter Maivia. Tag Team Division, the Blackjacks, Mulligan and Lanza. Lanza was so instrumental in my career in WWE. The Ladies Division, Leilani Kai. Man, those women really paid some heavy dues back in the day. Colleague Division, I guess more announcers type, Mean Gene Okerlund, who's fantastic. The television era from 43 to 84, Hans Schmidt and Greg Valentine. And the modern era, 85 to present, Sergeant Slaughter, the one and only, and myself, Steve Austin. How do you guys go about the voting process and selecting these inductees?
First off, I just want to throw in there, too, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We are run by a board of directors, and that board of directors has in their bylaws a set of sort of a blueprint on our ballot system, and that is we have a 3-person committee, a committee chair and two people underneath that committee chair that set the ballot, and they set that ballot through nominations that are mailed into the Hall of Fame during the year from families, friends, fans of people that they believe should be in the Hall of Fame. And then we also use a set of historians throughout the country that send in their recommendations through their research and their study into this sport. And this 3-person committee then sits down with all this information and creates a ballot. Once they create a ballot, the ballot is then sent to the board of directors for approval. Once the ballot is approved, then the ballot is mailed out to the voting committee. And the voting committee, right now, the numbers are somewhere in the 50s that we can mail ballots to. And when we get those ballots back, it's a month-long process. We mail them out. When we get them back in, the count's made. The official count is then sent to the board of directors where they make another count of the ballots to confirm it. And then we announce the inductees for the year. And it is a very challenging process. I cannot tell you enough that it's been successful for the first 15 years, but also tell you that this new board is looking at it that in our 15th year of induction, Steve, we still don't have a referee into the Hall of Fame. He's in that same category as a Mean Gene Okerlund that gets to, when I started, those guys traveled and went like Gene did from the AWA to here to there for different organizations, where most referees stayed in a territory and never left their home. So we have to look at some adjustments to the ballot this year to make sure that we're honoring everybody that needs to be honored.
You know, I couldn't agree with you more about the referees. I'm a big football fan, and a lot of times people will scoff. I guess it's probably punters. Ray Guy immediately comes to mention. They're always kind of looked over. But, man, Johnny, as you know, as long a career as you had, and I know that referee, I mean, they can make or break a match. They're to me, they're just as important as one of the boys. And, well, they are one of the boys first and foremost. But, man, I tell you what, a good referee can make a good match great. It just makes all the difference in the world. So, and one of my favorite referees, and I know you've worked with a ton of them, but just to stand out on the top of my list is Tommy Young.
Yeah, and I go back to a Red Shoes Dugan or a Sandy Barr or a Jack Howe. There's so many, Ronnie West. There's so many from around the country, again, that have really been overlooked right now. Charlie, I mean, just, God, there's so many of them. So we have to fix that issue and make sure that, again, this hall, for it to stand alone, like you said, and it does stand alone, we don't promote any one promotion. We promote all wrestling. And that's what we have to make sure we're doing properly at the Hall of Fame.
Well, I'm looking forward to getting down there, and I am going to make it down there. When I think of Wichita Falls, me being from Texas, I think about the drought. And Wichita Falls was really not in a good way as far as water supply was going because you guys hadn't gotten any rain. Have you guys kicked out of the drought yet? I know Houston just got flooded. Austin caught some rain. Are y'all catching any of that over there yet? Have y'all gotten some relief?
Yeah, we had a real bad problem with drought there for a couple of years, but now the last 2 seasons have really hammered us with rain, so we're really blessed. And I'll tell you, my experience, I was born and raised in Southern California and have lived in Texas since 1981, and I've seen this cycle, and it never seems to fail that we'll get dry for a little bit, then we're going to get really wet for a little bit. And I think that just sort of God saying, hey, I'm in charge here, not you guys.
Hey, man, I'm glad you brought up California because that brings us back to your formative years when you started some amateur wrestling. Let's get into you being in the ring. But before you got in the ring, as a 10-year-old, you started amateur wrestling. How advanced did you get with amateur wrestling, and did it help you in your pro career?
Oh, absolutely. My dad was very instrumental in me wrestling because my brother Kenny was a state champion in California, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps, so I started wrestling at the age of 10. And my brother Ken, and most people know Ken Mantell, he's 12 years older than I am. I have 2 older brothers, one 15, one 12. I was the last try for a girl, but I wanted to wrestle, and my dad took me to tournaments, double elimination tournaments. As a 10-year-old, a big chubby 10-year-old kid, I got beat every week for a while, and eventually started sort of turning the tide there and started winning my share. And yeah, wrestling really helped me gain a lot of self-confidence. It helped me realize that I could walk out into any setting or situation and handle myself in it. And not just because you could take somebody to the ground or something like that. If you had to talk about it or you had to discuss something or politic about something, I think my wrestling career taught me all that. So it's really been something I preach all my life to kids. If you want to learn a sport, try amateur wrestling because it's going to be you out there on the mat all by yourself. You're imano, and there's nobody else to blame if you win or lose.
Now, your brother Kenny was 12 years older than you. He decided to get into the business of professional wrestling. Now, were you guys watching as a kid and growing up in Chino? Were y'all going down to the Olympic Auditorium where wrestling was on fire back in the day? How were you introduced to the sport?
I was introduced through TV, watching Freddie Blassie and John Tolis and all the guys back in that day, the Hollywood Blondes, Rocky Johnson, Pork Chops Cash. Yeah, we were fed some of the best wrestling there in Southern California. Grew up watching it on TV, and actually my brother Kenny's role into professional wrestling after college and having a family and kids and all that was through a rooster fight in Oklahoma. He met a gentleman by the name of Jack Armstrong that then took him down to introduce him to Fritz von Erich, and that's how he got started. So he was, I think, 23 or 24, maybe 25 when he got started.
Now, I know of your brother more through his booking of world-class championship wrestling, all the accolades and how highly everyone thought of him as a booker. I didn't know too much about his wrestling career. How did he do in the ring? Because, again, his reputation to me was one of the main bookers of world class.
Well, he was the NWA World Junior Heavyweight Champion for about 2.5 years, and he won that title from Danny Hodge.
Oh, geez.
So I guess Bill Watts and Leroy McGurk really took a liking to Ken and really helped promote him. And I think Fritz had a lot to do with that as well. Fritz started him in Dallas. And in the hall, I have a picture that Fritz signed, I guess apparently when he was going to Florida to train with Hiro Matsuda, and it said on there, "Horrible name but great kid." And I'd like to sort of keep track of him. So I think Kenny, much like me, starting the way I did, he was very blessed in the way he got started and was around a lot of great people that really taught him the right way.
Hey man, real quick story about Leroy McGurk, because at this point in time, when Kenny passed through there, that would have been was that the Oklahoma Territory?
Yes.
Okay, now Leroy McGurk, when he was a young kid, was blinded in one of his eyes in a swimming accident. Later, he was riding passenger on the way to a restaurant in a car. The driver had to hit the brakes because a car pulled out in front of him. Leroy hit the dash. His mirrored sunglasses or whatever went into his eye and completely blinded him and ruined his career. But he would go on to run the territory along with Bill Watts and still train people. Did you know, Leroy, when all this was going on, was this before your time, or do you know of what I'm speaking about, and give any details on how this happened?
Well, I've heard a lot of different stories to it, how all that happened. I just know that when I met Leroy, he was blind in both eyes, and him and his wife were so kind to me as an 18-year-old kid starting in this business. And back in those days, there was a trip from Houma, Louisiana to Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that was a Sunday night show to a Monday night show. And lots of times, Leroy and his wife were, being so gracious, they let me come in and sort of sleep in the office all day so I didn't have to pay for a hotel room. So they were very instrumental in my career, talked to me a lot through it. Leroy told me lots of stories about his amateur career and then him changing to be a pro. And then, he was so instrumental in making that NWA World Junior Heavyweight title mean a lot because he started traveling around the world with it. So very, very, very knowledgeable man about wrestling and such kind people.
When I watch your in-ring style, I never get a sense that you were an amateur wrestler from a shooter's aspect, because a lot of guys who come from the amateur ranks, or many guys, have that shooter mentality, and I don't think they're able to develop into a true pro style, and it hinders them. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And I think maybe that's ego or competitiveness.
I think, it's funny you say that to me, because when I was training and breaking in L.A., Dory Funk looked at me and he said, "Kid," he said, "you know how to wrestle. You keep wrestling in your business in the ring, and that'll make you different from everybody else." So I always tried to wrestle some, but I also wanted to be the true professional in the ring. So my style was my style, whether I was good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. My style was my style my entire career. Whether I was throwing candy to the kids or they were trying to throw beer on me, I tried to do the same thing every night in the ring that I did my entire career.
Dude, who taught you how to wrestle in the ring from a pro-style standpoint? Who broke you in?
Well, I was broken in Los Angeles, California by Leo Garibaldi, who would send me to the ring on Wednesdays and Fridays at the Olympic Auditorium with whoever was on the card and whoever's in the territory. So my first month in the business, the names that I'm going to read off to you right now are just because I was in the right place at the right time. And those guys were Butcher Vachon, Neil Gay, the Hangman, Ron Starr, Adrian Adonis, Chavo Mondo, Hector Guerrero, and even their matriarch of the family, Gory Guerrero, spent some time in and around the ring with me. Red Shoes Dugan, my brother Ken, Roddy Piper, Dory Funk came in for a month doing a little angle out there, and he'd work out with me on Wednesdays and Fridays. And then after he left, Peter Maivia came out for 3 weeks, and he would come spend time with me. Tor Tanaka, Pedro Morales, John Tolis. The list, I could go for another 10 minutes, but those were the guys that got into the ring with me every Wednesday and Friday at the Olympic to help teach me some part of this business. And then, of course, all my trips I made with Roddy and him going to San Bernardino or Bakersfield an hour or two early before they opened the doors to work out with me were just invaluable time with Roddy Piper.
How many years did Roddy get in before you that he was able to teach you? 3, 4, 5 years? Because y'all were similar in age.
Yeah, he had been in the business about 5 years when I met him, 4 years, something like that.
So I always looked at you as being a wrestler, pro wrestler, like you said, a technician, a guy who could wrestle. Did you model your style after anybody? Like Ric Flair influenced the beginning of my career because I was trying to be a guy who could wrestle, not super scientific, but I was more wrestling braced. After I got dropped on my head, I turned into more of a brawler. So your style, was it always the same from start to finish? Was there an evolution, or was that what you were trying to be, the wrestler that you were, a technician, but a guy that could throw punches and have a brawl as well?
Well, I think it goes back to the story of how I started in L.A., and I started out refereeing a few matches, and then Leo thought it was time for me to get a match in, so I had my first match in Bakersfield, California. Then I had 2 more matches, and he called me into his office, and he said, "Kid," he said, "we're going to have to change something with you. I got to put you under a mask. You're using your facial expressions too much. You're not doing stuff with your body." So from that point forward, I ordered a brand new pair of boots and new tights, and got a couple different jackets and a mask, and they booked me as Mr. USA for the rest of the time, I guess about a 4 or 5 month period that I was finishing up my college classes. I worked under a mask then, and I worked against everybody that he had in the territory under that mask. And he said it was because I had to learn how to use my body in everything I did. So I really concentrated, then you lost all facial expression. So then you had to really concentrate at an arm bar in your other hand, explaining to the people where it hurts. And there was a lot of education that went on during that time, and it was coming from Leo Garibaldi and Gory Guerrero, Chavo, Tora Tanaka. A lot of those older guys at that time, when I was starting, would pull me to the side and talk to me about what I did right and what I did wrong in the match. And again, I was just blessed, man. I was at the right place at the right time.
What was the difference when you put the hood on? Did that give you a freedom or a sense of security because, hey, man, you were able to basically hide behind the mask and freed you up to use the body the way Garibaldi wanted you to?
Yeah, I think so. I think it allowed me to explore stuff maybe I hadn't done before without that mask on. It maybe gave me a little alter ego of some type where maybe I thought I was bigger and badder than I was without the mask on. I don't know. I mean, the education, I cannot tell you enough about the education I got from the people that were around me that would say stuff to me. And then even to the point where they would, because again, in those days, there were no cell phones and no instant media or anything like that. You had to go home and watch it on tape if it was something being recorded and then come back and talk about it. So it was a longer process, but again, the guys that were around me at that time, Steve, were just remarkable in their teaching skills. And, I tell people all the time, one of my dearest friends in the business, I met him in California as a punk kid, as a Hollywood blonde, and then later got to hang out with him as a Freebird, but Buddy Roberts. And I tell people this all the time. If you needed to get a lesson in wrestling, you need to get it from a guy that could give you a PhD in it, and that was Buddy Roberts, because he could teach you those little nuances about the ring of when and why you have to do something, or when you have to back off, or when those kind of guys. And I was surrounded with them in L.A., just surrounded with them.
So when you say when to back off, when you were under the hood as Mr. USA, were you working heel baby?
I did both. He allowed me to explore both sides at that time. Because, again, I pretty much worked with the roster up one side and down the other.
Now, you're a young guy in the business. Who was calling the match?
The veterans.
Gotcha. Which did you prefer over the course of your career under the mask? Mr. USA, you're working heel and baby, so it's a learning process, as basically every single match you ever have is a learning process. But once you got rooted in the business and established yourself as a name and a multi-champion, did you prefer working heel or did you prefer working baby?
Oh, man, I enjoyed working babyface here in Dallas in the early 80s for Fritz, but I also really enjoyed my time as a heel in California under a mask again. but as a different character as the Hood in California in 1980. So, I really felt like I could do it either way. If I had to have a preference, I guess I like being babyface better.
But I think that kind of goes basically with your personality and your background and who you are as a man.
Probably.
What would you say? I always have my opinions on what a good babyface needs to get over, what a good heel needs to get over. From a veteran standpoint such as yours, what does a babyface need to get over?
Well, they have to have, it's terrible to say this, but I think you have to have that it about you, whatever it may be. There's something that the fans gravitate to, whether they hate you or like you. There's just something about it, and with the right kind of push from the TV side of it, I think you could get a broomstick over. If it was done the right way. You just have to have. There's something about that it factor that I don't know that. And when I say that, it's sort of a funny story to say today, but one time in Dallas in the mid-'80s, and of course my position in the Dallas territory in the mid-'80s was Fritz brought me into a meeting and said, look, I want you to be the guy that when somebody comes into town, when they beat you, they finally get to wrestle one of my boys. And that's sort of how they kept me throughout the Dallas days. And I'll never forget one night in Fort Worth after I'd put somebody over out in the ring, Kevin walked up to me and he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure, man, what's up? And he said, how do you do it? You get beat all the time, yet the people still like you.
Keep going. That's great.
And I think it's just how you do it in the ring. Whether I was going up or going down, it didn't matter to me in the ring. I still got the same stuff across. Because when I broke into the business, if you went out there and just beat somebody like they were a piece of crap, it didn't make you much better because all you were doing was beating a piece of crap. But if you went out there and made your opponent look like you had a real opponent and it was a fight and a struggle out there, whether you got beat or whether you won, both guys got their stuff over. And I think that's the real trick to this business. It is teamwork, and it is both people. And I understand there's times where you have to make somebody bigger than life, but they're only bigger than life for that moment. The rest of the time, they got to live in this life too. And I just think I was very fortunate, man. Again, I was in the right places at the right time.
But also, and I think when you say the it factor or the X factor, whatever you want to call it, and I think that's more kind of on the star making end of that. But as a babyface, you had it. But here's the things I noticed about you as a babyface worker: tremendous fire and a great lockup, and you a great seller. You sold with your body, your face. I love, and I'm going to recommend a couple of your matches at the end of this podcast. One of the matches with Gino. There's another match with another guy, but a lot of times, guys will go for that first cover, and they'll, the guy on the bottom, the babyface, say, "We'll wait for that 2 or that 2 and 3 quarter count early on in the match." A lot of the things I liked about you, you'd kick out before the referee even got down, or you'd kick out on 1 count. The guy hadn't worn your gas gauge down enough, so you had that fire, you kicked out, you had a sense of urgency, and you would sell. And so I invested in your character. You made me care about you. You weren't bulletproof. You weren't built like a Greek god. Another thing I liked about you, had great lockups. And a lockup is everything, but also, if there's a break in the action or if that heel took a powder or whatever was the opening part of that match where you guys started the story, you'd back off. You'd have that footwork. There was an energy about you. You weren't rushing. At this time, you were probably a 6-year vet by the time I'm watching your stuff down in Dallas. But you weren't rushing. You were already, a pro-grade pro, and you looked like a pro, in your presentation. Do you know what I'm saying here?
Yeah, and, I got to give credit to some other people because that first summer that I was in the business, that school ended and I was going to come back here to work, Kenny took me down to introduce me to Fritz, and this is the summer of '76, and I meet Fritz in his office at the Sportatorium, and he tells Kenny, he says, absolutely. Again, no cell phones, any quick communication back in that day. He said, absolutely, John can start next week. He can come in and work with all the boys. And we shook Fritz's hand, said we'd call him when we got home. We needed to talk about it and stuff. And as soon as we got out to Kenny's car, he said, well, you can't start here. And I said, well, why not? Because my brother Kenny had a dairy up in Forestburg, Texas. And I thought, man, I was going to have me a cheap place to live and be able to be here and everything. And he said, you can't start here because you're going to teach all those kids, Fritz's kids, how to wrestle. You don't need to teach anybody how to wrestle. You need to have some of these guys teach you how to wrestle. We drove back up to the dairy in Forestburg. He called Bill Watts. I started the next Saturday for Bill Watts and Leroy McGurk at the Shreveport TV. And that day, just to give you a little more about my career and how my life has been in this business, that day I drove in, but I parked my car in Shreveport, and they said, we got a ride for you. This guy's going to come get you here at TV. He didn't work TV today, but you and him are going to go to Jackson, Mississippi. And I said, okay. And the guy that was going to come get me was Bruiser Brody.
No, this is classic. Stop right there. I'm going to take a pause for the calls for the sponsors to keep the show on the air for free. I'm coming right back with the Cowboy Johnny Mantell. He's talking about Bruiser Brody on the Steve Austin Show. Weeds are like nature's boomerang. Roundup knows they keep coming back, and with one spray of Roundup Max Control 365, kill those stubborn little rascals right down to the root and keep them away for up to a year. Draw the line and stop weeds from boomeranging back. And this week I'm drawing the line at the WWE brand split, with SmackDown becoming a live show on Tuesday nights, and what a great opportunity this will be for some of the NXT talent. Been looking for Finn Balor to come up to the main roster forever. Dude's a great worker who's done some great things in NXT. Maybe this will be his chance to work the big stage. And Bayley, the NXT Women's Champ, who's had some great matches with Sasha Banks, who is very, very marketable. She's a hugger, and I would love to see her on the big stage as well. So I'm drawing the line at the WWE brand split and how this could be a great opportunity to see more rising stars on the main roster at WWE. And Roundup's drawing the line at weeds. Your patio should be for cooking out and kicking back, and Roundup's Max Control 365 helps keep it that way by keeping weeds away for up to 1 year. One spray of Roundup Max Control 365 gets you up to 365 days of weed-free relaxation time. Draw the line. All right, I'm back with Johnny Mantell. He mentioned the name Bruiser Brody, and Bruiser's coming to pick you up. I got to hear this. How was your first meeting with Bruiser Brody?
I said to Grizzly Smith, I said, well, how do I know it's him? He says, oh, you'll know it's him when he gets here. He'll be in a white 240Z. I said, okay. So I'm sitting out in front of the TV station. I believe it was Channel 12 in those days in Shreveport. Sitting out in front of the station with my bag, waiting on somebody to come get me. And here comes this white 240Z, and this body like unfolds out of this car. And I look at him and I go, wow, yeah, I'll know it's him, all right. And we made an acquaintance, man, that we were friends the rest of his life, and a dear, dear friend of mine. I still talk to his widow regularly, very nice family. Frank was so kind to me, and to be honest with you, I had 3 or 4 chances after he passed away. They called and wanted me to help with the book and do stuff in Puerto Rico, and I've never gone back to that country since Frank died there.
How was it traveling with him on the road? And I'm surprised, I mean, to my listeners, the 240Z was a very famous Datsun Nissan car, which would be the 260, the 280, turned into the 300. But that 240Z was way back in the day. It reminds me of traveling down the road with my Honda CRX, not as sexy as the 240Z, with 6'11" Kevin Nash. What did you learn from Brody? Because I was talking to Skandar Akbar a long time ago, and Brody had just come into the Dallas territory. And you know Skandar, we'll get some stories about him, I'm sure. He was wonderful to me. He took me under his wing, and Bruiser Brody, as you know, his real name was Frank Goodish. So he asked Frank, he goes, how you doing? And Bruiser says, Well, I'm doing okay. And Skandar says, you saving any money? And about that time, Bruiser pulled out a can of tuna fish and was eating tuna fish out of a can. He was indeed saving his money. So that spoke to who Bruiser was. And a guy watched his money. But he was a really smart guy, and through his presentation or the way he conducted himself in a ring, you knew he could work his ass off. You knew he was a badass. You might not know he's a great guy or that he's highly intelligent. He was. From my research, I've come to know this. What did you pick up from Bruiser?
Well, he probably taught me some of the greatest lessons I needed to learn about this business, and he probably made me a little more sometimes difficult to work with or for, because he told me when I very first met him and he watched me wrestle and we traveled, made this loop together, and we got all this private time again in a car to talk. He always told me, he said, Johnny said, you're a real wrestler. You can go out there and wrestle all night long. Protect yourself and protect this business. Don't let anybody abuse you because they think they need to. If somebody's going to beat you, they need to work for it. If somebody's going to do something to you, they need to work for it because you've worked hard at what you're doing. Believe in yourself and believe what you're doing and get out there and get the job done. And so to go full circle with that story, later on, because again, I met him at 18, and then later on here in the Dallas territory, now flash forward, my brother Kenny's booking. Well, anytime Frank and I would get together, the first thing he'd do, he'd put his fingers up and put them in a cross, and he says, I have to exercise you in case any of your brother's problems are with you. Because again, as you've studied Frank's career, he didn't put up with a lot of crap from people, and he came in to draw money. I mean, that's what he came in to do. And he had his thinking of ways to do it, and of course, bookers and promoters had their thinking and ways to do it. So there was always a clash right there. But Frank and I always got along. We didn't talk a lot about, especially when Kenny was booking, we didn't talk a lot about that. We talked more about our kid or our kids or what was going on in our lives. And he always talked about investing properly and trying to put your money into something that you can always get to it, but it's always there for you to have too. And he was just really a great educational piece during out my career.
Hey, what was the story here I'm reading on the internet? Did you get taken as somewhat of a prima donna at one point in your career?
Yeah.
You don't do that. I mean, here's the thing. Johnny and I started. Well, no, I got to bring it up. So, what was the prima donna story? Because in knowing you're so down home and country and about family, I don't see how you would ever get taken as being a prima donna.
Well, I think there for a little while, I made a deal in Japan, and I was going 2 to 3 times a year to Japan and was making that money. And as the territory started sort of closing down and there wasn't as much work, and independents were opening up, they would call and want to book me. And I would, I'd always say, again, my learnings to different guys throughout my career that taught me so much, I'd always ask, well, what are we doing? Who am I working with? What's the pay? And there would be lots of times where after I got all those questions answered, I would say, no, it's okay. I'll just stay home and take care of my stuff here. And so there for a little while, some of these promoters sort of felt like I was being a prima donna because I just didn't want to come in and work a card. I felt like, again, my dad and I had a thoroughbred racehorse farm. I was breeding, at the farm we were breeding 30, 40 mares a year, and we were galloping horses every day on a training track. And there was just a lot of activities going on, and I'd be gone for 5 to 6 weeks at a time to Japan. And when I got back home, I enjoyed being at home. I enjoyed being at the farm. And I just didn't feel like I needed to go put my body through the abuse if I really didn't like who I was working with, what kind of pay they were going to give me, and if we were doing it for the right reason to keep my name sort of in a decent place, because I do get a lot of good club from back in the world-class days, and again, a 6'1", 225, and just an athlete, and I just I always felt like I had so much other things going on and in my life wasn't about just showing up and being with the boys. I had a daughter to raise, and my mom and dad and I had a farm, and we were raising horses, and there was just so much else to do that I chuckled at you saying prima donna, because I admit that sometimes that people sort of felt that way about me, but it wasn't because I didn't want to. It was just because it wasn't advantageous for me.
No, dude, and dude, that's called looking out for yourself. And I don't know how many of these kids I tell today, I say, man, look out for yourself. If you're not going to look out for yourself, ain't nobody else going to look out for you either. And they'll see that as an advantage for them to take advantage of you. So maybe it was construed or taken as being a prima donna. But, dude, it sounds like you had a pretty good head on your shoulders, had a lot of reason, had a life other than professional wrestling, and had the smarts and the wherewithal to not just go into any situation because it's a gig that's being offered to you. You don't take every single gig that's being offered to you just because you're a pro wrestler and there's a wrestling match. That's called managing your career, correct?
Yeah, and I was always taught if you're the smartest guy in the dressing room, you're in the wrong place. You need to surround yourself with people that can teach you and that can help you. If you go to, and I know some of these independent shows of today because I've attended a few of them, you know, sometimes I wonder who's really thinking about how and what they're doing. No chance of winning. They have no chance of it because they're out there with somebody that's not smarter than they are. When I first started, and when my brother Kenny got me down there to Louisiana and to Bill Watts, I got to work with every night the Assassins, the Medics, the Stan Hansens, the Jerry Oates, the Mike Georges, Salento Rodriguez's, those kind of guys that took you out there and guided you through matches. And that's how you have to learn. And so I always tried to make myself, made sure that I was always in a position to get better and maybe make that extra dollar, or, you know, because, again, at the end of the day, you and I know we're going to look at it the same way. It's not about what you've done and where you've been. It's about how much you get home to your family. And that's the most important thing.
You know, I tell the guys that I talk to that same exact stuff, Johnny. I say, hey, man, you know, I was talking to a kid the other day. He goes, it's funny that they're paying us to do this because I do it for free. And I told him, I said, you know what, we all say that, but let me give you the reality. If at the end of your run you don't have some money in the bank, you did it wrong. It's great to be able to go out there and love what you do. And I did, and so did you. But at the end of the day, you're in business. And if you take it for anything other than that, you're not playing the game right. You're not playing the business or working the business right. You've got to look at it for yourself, and you've got to look out for your pay, your spot, your angles. You've got to be involved.
Yeah. You have to manage your own stuff, and that's something I tell people all the time. Leo Garibaldi got me my first trip to Japan. Everyone after that, I was involved in the process of getting me to Japan. I went to Israel for the Dallas office, but made my own deal there. When I made 7 or 8 trips with David Manning, the referee, to the Virgin Islands, and helped on those tours and did a lot of the dressing room stuff with the guys and finishes and stuff. But I made my own deal when I went and did that. You know, when I was very young, I got an offer to Mexico to go down there. They wanted me on a 2-year deal, and I was just afraid I didn't speak enough Spanish, so I didn't go down there and work. But sometimes I think, oh, man, I maybe should have, you know. You just have to make those decisions in your life and accept them, good or bad, learn from them, and then move on to the next one and get, you know, because this life's short, man. We got to enjoy every day we can, and you got to do it in the best way we can. And I think that would be the thing about my career was I was just surrounded with so many great guys that would help guide you in those directions of your career.
You mentioned some big names in that past list of guys that you brought up, some technicians and great workers. I got to ask you, though, about Stan Hansen, because Stan, I was fortunate to run across him this past year at WrestleMania, as were you. You've known him for a long time. And I'm one of Stan Hansen's biggest fans. Watching him and Brody do their stuff in Japan, that strong style. The Japan's working strong style. Hansen was working stiff, and god dang it, I just loved it. So my question to you is, knowing that he knew you, probably liked you, surely he wasn't as stiff with you and stateside as he would become in Japan. Or am I wrong?
Well, my introduction to Stan Hansen, again, was at 18 years old. And Bill Watts and Leroy had decided they were going to give me this little 5-minute spot my first summer in the business wrestling as Johnny Boyd on Mid-South TV. I had this little spot where I would compare an amateur move to a pro move every week on TV. And about 3 or 4 weeks in, my move of the week is a fireman's carry. The difference between an amateur's fireman's carry, which is rolling through on the hip, and a pro one that's on one knee and up and over the top. That was my little segment at the start of this show. Well, my match on that TV was with the lariat Stan Hansen. So Grizz and Bill Watts says, this is what we want you guys to do. Stan, we want him to fireman carry you as many times as he can. When you're tired of it, you need to give him the lariat. So that was pretty much our match. And Stan, immediately after we got done with our direction of what we had to do, Stan looked at me and he said, kid, I want to apologize to you right now. And I said, what for? And he said, because when I take these glasses off and have to go to the ring, I can't see much. So he said, I'll turn around. You need to be there doing it to me. And when I tell you, I'll hit the ropes and come off and give you one. Yes, sir. So we went out to the ring, and that's what we did. And that lariat had a little steam behind it, would have hit me. But we've been friends all these years. Stan is such a supporter of the Hall of Fame. We are so proud to have him in to induct the Blackjacks this year into the Hall of Fame. And it's always great to see Stan.
It was great to shake his hand the other day, but when you say, kid, when I take these glasses off, I don't see so great, was that the old excuse?
Well, if it was okay because I took it and liked it. And I, if I could get back in the ring today, I'd sure like to be back in there with him because he did something that I always tried to do, and that's what he made it look like it was real. And I always tried to be the same way.
I agree 100%. I just got so much respect for that guy. It's a great story. Hey, tell me a little bit about working for Cowboy Bill Watts. I got a chance to meet him down in WCW when I was a kid, and I started watching Houston wrestling. I was watching Paul Bosch and Mid-South Power Pro, catching the stuff from the Carolinas, NWA. And, man, that was some of the best television going. And I love that Mid-South action, or Power Pro, whatever you want to call it. I would have loved to have been, able to work for Bill Watts and get a chance to sit under the learning tree. What did you pick up down there in that territory?
Well, he gave me an opportunity to learn from day one. Again, I think him and my brother Kenny were very close at one time. And so when I came in there and started working for him, he sort of had a little special interest in me, so he always made sure that and again, as an 18-year-old kid, you didn't look at it as punishment, but I would do I would be in a tag match every night in the semi-main, and then I also doubled up in the captain's match. So I was wrestling twice a night on every card, and that would be 4 times on Saturday and 4 times on Sunday. But I was working, like I said, I was working with the Assassins and with the Medics and the ACK and with some great talent. So I was in the learning process, and Bill was always good to me. Anytime I got stuck someplace and he was in his plane, he'd ask me if I wanted to fly back someplace with him, and he always talked to me about the business and how to protect it and do the things the right way. I have no complaints. I know there's a lot of people that complain about his payoffs and different things. As far as with me, Bill always treated me exactly the way he told me he was going to do, and he has always respected me as me, and we still have a relationship today. And I know he had some surgery to his back. Hope he's healing up and everything's good.
Hey, man, how was that territory? Because I know there were some brutal drives due to the states that the Mid-South territory covered. Grueling drives, and like you just said at the beginning of the podcast, okay, it's going to be about a 4-hour ride, give or take. So how did you deal with that? Who would you travel with?
Well, you traveled with a group of everybody, but I traveled a lot in Louisiana with Butch Reed, Killer Carl Cox, Jerry Oates. I did some with the Freebirds later on in my career down there. My brother, I'd travel with Grizz a lot. Grizz and Akbar, I traveled with them a lot. I got a lot of knowledge from a lot of miles in cars with those two men about the business and angles and how to do stuff the right way. You just sort of hopped in and fitted in where you could. When Sakurada first came to the United States, he traveled with me for about a month solid. Killer Khan, Kabuki. I mean, you just sort of made those road trips in different places. Ernie the Cat Lad took me to some of the best eating places in Louisiana I've ever been, and nobody'd even know they were there unless he knew they were there. God, Steve, there's just so many of them, so many trips. I really didn't try to just travel with the same guys over and over and over again. I tried to sort of broaden my horizons by getting to know everybody the best I could.
But the one thing about that territory, Johnny, as you well know, kayfabe was king, and the business wasn't exposed yet. Talk about, because I know when you're saying you're traveling with different guys, it's all heels or all babies, because Watts would come unglued if there was any breaking of kayfabe.
Yeah. You traveled with your like kind. There's no doubt about that. And if you did get in a car with somebody from the other side of the fence, you did it at night, down the road, away from the building and away from everybody, or you met up at a hotel and somebody's room was sort of the private gathering for the night, and that's where you all got together. But yeah, it was very strict back in those days. He didn't want to hear it. I mean, I never had that issue with him, so I don't know the consequences, but I know there was different guys that just wouldn't listen to that stuff, and they didn't stick around very long.
There was an old rumor that if one of the boys got in a fight in a bar, it was okay if you got in a fight, but if you lost the fight, you got fined.
Yeah.
To like a regular, if you got in a fight with a fan / mark, someone other than the business. Any truth to that?
Well, again, I heard stories about that stuff, but I tried to stay away from all that trouble things. You know, when I first broke into the business, Don Fargo, the Fargo brothers were down there, and to be honest with you, they sort of intimidated me and scared me because of some of the stuff everybody said they would do and the way they would act and do stuff. So I tried to stay pretty far away, and later on in life, I got to know Don very well, and such a sweetheart of a guy, and they were wild at that time. And, you just, you sort of picked your spots. And again, I tried to always represent myself, my mom and dad, and my family as to the best of my ability.
What was your favorite period of your career? I know there were so many of them, and you lasted so long. But was it the heyday of world class? Was it working with Watts? Was it going to Japan?
Well, I really enjoyed my Japan trips. I really enjoyed that style of work over there, that close and getting after it every night. I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed my year out in L.A. under the mask as the Hood. I got to have so many fun matches and with different guys, and being on top out there, wrestling the best that came through. They teamed me up with Don Jardine for a while, Ron Starr. I really enjoyed my time in L.A. But the early 80s here in Dallas, we were rock stars, man. I mean, that just point blank, that's how we were. Everybody knew who we were. You went into some place, they had a table for you. We were rock stars in those days, and well deserved, because the TV was so strong and so over.
Man, I came in on the back end of that when I broke in 1989, but I was playing college football at North Texas State in 86, 87, so I was coming there. But really the heyday was prior to that. And you got there, give or take, around 1980?
Yeah, I moved to Texas full time in 1981. I started for Fritz in 82. Up till then, I would be in and out for Bill Watts and Leroy in Louisiana, and I'd gone to Portland and California, and again making my trips to Japan every year. And I spent a year in Jackson, Mississippi, when George Calkin pulled away from Bill Watts in 1978, and I worked there as Johnny Mantell for a year for him under an AWA label, and Nick Bockwinkel was the champion. So I got, I was sort of, again, and I know I keep sounding like a broken record, but I was so diverse in my education in this business because I got to be around so many different people during my early time in this business. I had 4 years I wrestled 350 matches plus. So with that kind of education, it's really hard to pick out a period of time. But my Dallas days are so memorable because I was here and the territory was so hot, and it was sort of the changing of the time. So that was very memorable to me. But I really enjoyed my time in LA as the Hood as well.
Man, I'll get back to those Dallas days here in a minute, but when you got in and all the guys that you mentioned were teaching you the ropes, working with you in the ring, you had your amateur background. I've always looked at Kurt Angle as being the guy that came from an amateur background to pick up the pro style faster than anybody I've ever seen in my career. But it sounds like you were pretty much a natural to it. How long did it take you till you felt comfortable in the ring, whether you're working heel or baby, mechanically proficient, and then the psychology to back that up?
Well, I guess after my stay in Mississippi for George Calkin, and I was a babyface the whole time there. After my stay there, I got to go to Portland, Oregon, and work for Don Owens. And I went up there with the intent of being a heel up there. And again, the crew I was with, was just remarkable. I mean, when I got there, it was Piper and Ed Wiskowski, Buddy Rose, Ron Starr and Adrian Adonis. Rick Martel was coming in and out. Jesse Ventura was coming in and out. Dutch Savage, Stan Stasiak, Gene Kaninsky. Don Leo Jonathan. It was just unbelievable. And I went up there to be a heel, and they turned me baby up there. And that's really when I really felt like I was getting my groove on. I was getting I could call it from either side of the fence. I was really starting to understand the promotion end, from the interviews to the talking about the town, to paper in the towns, to I was really getting sort of my mojo in there in Portland, Oregon. And then I got to go to LA and work for Mike LaBelle again under the mask. So it was that 79, 80 time frame is when I really was starting to feel very comfortable about being in the ring. And I knew no matter where I was at, I knew where I was at. So it was during those times when I really felt that real comfortable time in the ring.
Hey, it was a few years until when I first started in Chris Adams' camp there in Dallas, I was not a fast learner. I didn't have an amateur background. We didn't have any of that stuff in South Texas when I was a kid growing up. I would have loved to have taken it had it been available, because I really like the individual sports. I like the team sports too, but I like the individual sports. So it took me a while to catch on. I wasn't a natural. It took me a lot of repetition, and I think you'll agree. You can work out with the guys, but it's on-the-job training. It's working in front of that crowd. Time after time after time, getting your chops up. And it was a couple of years in the business that I realized that you're out there and it's a very serious thing that you're trying to do, have a match, but you're supposed to actually be having fun while you're out there. And after 4 or 5 years in the business, me being very serious-minded because I didn't know you could relax. But when I started relaxing, because I had learned the business at hand was still serious, but I was actually out there enjoying myself with the person that I was working with, and sometimes being able to have a word or two, but entertain the folks. And by the time you got out of the ring, reflect on it and just think about how fun it was. Where at first I was very task-oriented. Go out there, have a wrestling match, and get out. It's serious business. There's no room for fun. You mentioned a couple of stories before we got on the Skype, and we're talking about when you were wearing the hood. You got a chance to have some fun with some guys. What were you doing underneath the hood?
Well, Chavo Guerrero designed the mask that I used as the hood. Later on, Tom Jones used it as Mr. Ebony here in Dallas. But the mask itself had a screen put over my mouth and over my eyes, so the fans couldn't see anything going on underneath that mask. So because I'd gotten relaxed in the ring, I was really starting to, like I said, sort of get my groove in the ring and getting knowing what I was doing. I had a lot of fun in L.A. because the fans or nobody could see my lips move. So working with Chavo or working with Tom Pritchard or working with those guys out there, I could say little things to them and try to make them crack up or try to lighten the moment up a little bit. I'd say something to Red Shoes Dugan and get his attention. I just really enjoyed that time. And again, I think it was because I was getting so relaxed in there, understanding what I was supposed to do. And then, like you said, now it turned into fun. It took that stress and that pressure off you where you could really enjoy it. And listening back to fan stories now about those days, I think it really showed in my work. You know, Chavo and or Tom Pritchard and I did this thing. I was undefeated out there for so long. Pritchard come in and he was undefeated. So we did this thing on the Beat the Champ deal they did on the TV out there, and we did about a 4 or 5 week deal. And it was one of those things where we built up to a match where, boy, I was just whooping his butt at the end of the match, and I wanted 5 more minutes, and he agreed to it. And so I went back to whooping on him, but something changed the tide, and now at the end of this 5 minutes, he's just whooping my tail and chasing me all over the place, and the bell rings, and now he's asking for 5 more minutes, and the referee and Jimmy Lennon come over and asked me if I want to give him 5 more minutes, and I literally said on the microphone, I said, no, that was 5 minutes. That was enough for tonight. We'll have to pick this up at another time, and I walked off. And this one of the historians out in California tells a great story that he was just a kid laying in bed, and he was supposed to be asleep, and his mom and dad didn't know he had a TV in the bedroom, and he was covered up with the blanket watching this on TV. And when I said that, he screamed at me through the TV. He was so mad I wouldn't give Pritchard 5 more minutes. And I really think that I was really catching on at that time and feeling comfortable in the ring, where it really improved my work because of those fun things. I'd whisper little things in people's ears and try to get them to laugh, or I'd get, maybe working with a young baby, I'd try to get him to relax a little bit and shake one leg and then the other and really start his comeback. So I really was feeling comfortable at that time in my skin. And again, I don't know if it was because behind that mask it gave me even more confidence. Maybe it was, but I just really was feeling comfortable in the business at that time.
The story about working with Stan Hansen, when he says, hey, you're going to feel that lariat, and you did. Talk about receipts in the business. I was always a pretty patient guy. If a guy was going to be a little bit on the well, first of all, I love working snug. I wouldn't call it strong style. I just say snug. And a lot of people complained about my comeback punches, but man, I was in it, and I wasn't trying to kill anybody. But there were some bruises and black eyes every here and there, every now and then. But I meant well. On the receiving end of some stiff action, Johnny, and needing to send a receipt, how forgiving were you? Because, again, you're trying to take care of you. You've got business to take care of. You've got a head on your shoulder. How patient were you, and would you send a receipt?
I didn't send very many through the years. There was a few times in Japan where we had to get to the ground. I guess, one of the biggest parts of my life, I guess, was here in the early 80s, and it was with your mentor, Chris Adams, and I tell this story a lot to people, but Chris had just come into the Dallas territory, and we were going to work a match in Fort Worth, and I have a lot of fans come up to me still to today and tell me that it's one of the greatest matches they've ever seen. It's on YouTube someplace, but anyway, long story short, Kenny, my brother Kenny, was doing the booking, and Bronco Lubitsch and, of course, David Manning were helping and doing parts of it. And they brought us in, and they said, Kenny said to Chris and I said, I need you guys to go 15-minute Broadway. And Chris said, well, Kenny, I think I need to beat him, in his English accent as he said it. And I sort of looked at Chris for him saying that, and then I looked back at Kenny, and Kenny looked at him and he said, I need you guys to go 15 minutes Broadway tonight. That's what I need. So we went to the ring to do that 15 minutes, and of course, Mr. Adams wasn't very happy about it. So when we got in the ring, there was some educational moments during the first little bit of that match, and we got through the 15-minute Broadway, and we both had a few red spots and Matt burns on us, but he had a few more than I did.
You know, if I'm not mistaken, I saw part of that match, and I believe he was wearing gold trunks at the time, and it ended with an attempted sunset flip. And then Bronco Lubis was refereeing that match, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I believe I saw part of that. And he didn't look too happy. I mean, and I know Chris, and I'll have that business face on. I'll have to go back and rewatch that. He was a great instructor for me when I went to the wrestling school. And there were 25 or 30 of us in the class, and we were, going to the school after the Saturday morning television taping. There was one ring. There's a limited amount of space in that ring, as you can well imagine. You've been there. So the training was what it was. I was there for 5 months, and then I came out onto my own. The thing I appreciated about Chris, as far as his feud with me, which helped propel me to win 1990 Rookie of the Year, the only reason I won it was because I was in a high-profile angle with a high-profile guy coming out of world class. Now, we would usually work the semi-main or maybe a match before that. Maybe every now and then we were the main on a house show or something. But it was just due to the attention. And the thing about Chris, from a business standpoint, and I don't know who was booking at the time. I don't believe it was Ken. But it might have been Ken, but he pretty well left our angle to be left up to Chris to book. And I just remember when Chris needed a win, he'd get a win. When I needed to get some heat on him, I got the heat on him after he got the win. So he was always about business, and he helped me out tremendously. It's just unfortunate that the way his life ended, I don't know what happened. Do you remember when that went down?
Well, it's funny throughout this whole process of being with the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame has been so humbling. And we had a gentleman who bought a storage unit locker that had a bunch of Chris Adams stuff in it. And in that locker is 6 years of Chris's yearly calendars. And I'm sure about the time you started, you saw all the boys would carry these yearly calendars around, and we'd keep track of our mileage and what town we wrestled at and who we were doing. And in Chris's case, his were complete novels about what shows he was running, who he was booking, who he was meeting with, when he was going to Japan, what these dates were, who this guy was coming in, that guy was coming in. Well, I have 6 years of his books. There's 1 year missing in the middle of this run. But we have 6 years, and it's I think it runs to about 2 years before he passed away. And now that we know the outcome, Steve, you can look at those books and see a spiral, sort of a downhill spiral of what was going on in his life. So to tell you exactly what all happened there at the end, I really don't know, but it's pretty interesting to come and look through these books and to see that spiral, because again, now that we know the outcome, we know there was something going on that wasn't good in his life.
Man, are these books available at the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame there in Wichita?
What we've done with them is we've processed these books with some help with some preservists to help preserve these books, and we've made copies of them. So the original books are going to be up in a shadow box on the wall, and the copies are going to be on a desk where people can look through them and see his life and times.
God dang, when's that going to be available? That'd be really interesting to see that.
Here in the next couple of weeks. That's been something we've been working on, and we're hoping to have that in place here in the next couple of weeks. I also have a book from Fritz von Erich, 1981. Every match, same type of book, a yearling calendar. Every show they ran that year, the dollar number they drew, and everybody that was on every card. And when the boys left to go here, or they went there, or Brody was coming in, or Inoki was coming in, or whatever this book has all that in it, plus the total dollar amount of what they drew every night in 1981. The other great piece that we've had donated, and it's with the University of Texas Arlington right now, being preserved, and that is a either 80 or 81 check ledger book from the St. Louis Wrestling Club that ran the Kiel Auditorium, and it shows every check they wrote that year to the talent, to the TV station, to the grips, it's pretty remarkable. And that's the kind of history that we're really wanting to show in here, to show the fans and the young wrestlers of many years from now the life and times of what it took to be in this business.
You know, I'll share a story with you real quickly before we wrap this thing up, and I'd love to continue this next week if you want to.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're going to continue next week with Johnny Mantell, but I was on an airplane one time, and Terry Taylor had was sitting in his chair on the airplane. He had the tray folded out in front of him from the seat in front of him, and he had all these receipts laying on the table, and he had his ledger notebook, and he was writing down the towns, writing down his expenses, itemizing everything, and I walked by and I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Man, I'm doing my receipts, for his taxes, for his write-offs." And he had everything organized. And he goes, "Kid, you need to start doing this." Of course, I never did that. But what I always tell kids these days is it's interesting when you get a chance to talk to a guy that's booked a territory for a while, or a guy, like Jim Cornette. I'll talk to Jim Cornette every now and then, and he has everything for years and years written down because he was booking. And so when you have some actual records that you can go back and look at and reference and remember, it's instrumental. So I tell all these kids these days that I talk to, I say, "Hey man, are you keeping a journal of some sort or a calendar or anything?" And back when I got on top in WWF, I would always ask what the house was. I knew what I would make. I knew the attendance, and so that was my learning curve, as to knowing, how much, I needed to make. So I always tell these kids these days, whether you just end up with a notebook full of 3 years to 10 years worth of dates, numbers, people, places, and I said, write down at least 3 sentences of what happened in your life on that day, because one of these days, maybe you'll write a book. Maybe it'll be able to generate income, because there's so many things I've forgotten, Johnny, over my career. There's holes. People ask me about specific years, and I'll say, I don't remember the invasion angle at all, because I don't. But had I written some of this stuff down, on the road, in an airplane, or driving down the road in a car, in a hotel, I'd have those memories. So I want to get out there to the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, Wichita Falls, to see what you're talking about. But to anybody out there, if you're going to get in the business, or you are in the business, and I don't know how many of these kids in the WWE I've told this to, you need to be writing all this stuff down: numbers, houses, towns, what you did, how you got there, what rent-a-car you was in, what hotel you stayed at. And it'll help you, because these are records that are either going to jar your memories, make you some money to write a book, or you can pass down to your kids or your grandkids so they can know what you did with your life. What are your
Absolutely.
thoughts?
Oh, I totally agree. I'm so mad at myself today because I wrestled with Andre the Giant 10 times out in L.A. I worked with Lou Thez and Gene Kaninsky, and I've wrestled with some of the greats in this business, but I have no documentation to prove it. It's just in my mind and my memories. And I tell these kids the same thing, Steve. Write stuff down. Keep track of your careers. And, of course, when I started, there were no cell phones and instant pictures and all that kind of stuff. So part of me says, boy, I'm sure glad there wasn't any, because how much trouble I might be in today because of some of the stuff. But also, I wish there would have been, so I had some of those pictures, because I sure would have had a picture of me beating Andre the Giant one day in the dressing room in a game of cribbage, or some of the other great things. King Curtis taking me for a cruise down the beach, different stories and times in my life that are just in my brain now. I don't have any documentation for. I wish I did.
All right, next time we come back, I want to talk about some of the people you just mentioned. I want to talk about how hot the Von Erichs were, that territory, a little bit of the dark side of the Dallas dressing room, talking with Andre, some more travel stories. I'll get some specific things, and we'll get into some high spots, some low spots, and we'll also talk about you real briefly. You were part of the brain study in Dallas when WrestleMania came through town, correct?
I was here when the Super Bowl came to town. The NFL did a brain study working on their CTE stuff, and I was in that brain study with a lot of the football players.
Well, let's get to that on the next time we talk, and we're going to talk in a couple of days for the next Tuesday podcast. After this is two guys shooting the breeze, talking about pro wrestling. Johnny had a tremendous run. It's been fun talking to him, and we're going to hook it up again next Tuesday. Johnny, I appreciate your time.
Steve, thanks so much, my friend. Anything for you?
Hey, anything we want to plug right here on this podcast for the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, any of your social media, anything for you that we can?
Yeah, pwhf.org. You can go to the website, get all the information. We also have a PWHF Facebook page. I'm not very technically capable with all this modern technology, so my better half has to handle and do a lot of that. So those are the two spots. Very soon we're going to start a newsletter to all our fans of our website that will tell you as we're bringing superstars in to sign autographs on Saturdays at the hall to meet and greet with the fans, and we're looking forward to starting that here in about the next 3 weeks.
All right, Johnny, I look forward to talking to you next week.
God bless, Steve. Have a great one, man. Take care of that arm.
All right, everybody, give me the go-home cue. It's time to wrap up this podcast and ride off in the sunset. I want to thank my guest, Cowboy Johnny Mantell, for giving me a couple of hours of his time this morning. He's going to be back next week. We're going to talk about Tales from the Road, Von Erichs, dealing with being on the road, life on the road, Andre the Giant. It's going to get better. I'm talking with a man who's been around the world a couple of times, and I'm having a good time talking to him. If you want to see a couple of Johnny Mantell matches, go to YouTube and just type in Cowboy Johnny Mantell. There'll be that video of him with Chris Adams. You'll catch that match in progress. There's a match with him and Gino Hernandez. There's one other match. I forgot his opponent. But watch Johnny Mantell's mechanics. Watch his fire. Watch the way he sells. Watch him kick out on those early covers. Watch the comeback. Watch the pacing. Never in a rush. The guy was a pro's pro. So anyway, dig some Johnny Mantell on YouTube, and you'll see the guy that I'm talking about. Again, my younger generation might not have heard of Cowboy Johnny Mantell, but I have, and I've been around him and have seen his work for a long time. It's great to talk to him. Anyway, we're looking forward to talking more with Johnny Mantell and the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame and all the other business that he's taking care of right now. Hey, folks, I'm going to wrap this podcast up real fast. All the T-shirts that I have, the pocket knife that I have, the Broken Skull IPA beer that I have. If you want any of that, just go to BrokenSkullRanch.com. There's a link for everything Steve Austin related. I want to say thank you guys very much for spreading the word about this podcast, because if it wasn't for you guys, this thing wouldn't be all over the world like it is. As of right now, this podcast ain't just nationwide. It's just not here in the United States and a big following in the UK. It's worldwide, all over the globe. Why? Because y'all are spreading the word. So thank you guys very much for telling your friends about it, and thank you very much for supporting the sponsors of the Steve Austin Podcast, because if I didn't have the sponsors, if I didn't have you guys, I couldn't do this for you for free twice a week. I want to give a big shout-out to DDP Yoga and the DDP Yoga Now app. Use promo code Austin316 right now for 10% off the Jake the Snake DVD. I want to give a shout-out to Scott's Roundup, and, of course, a big thank you to Amazon, who've been supporting this podcast since day one. If you use my Amazon links whenever you're doing any online shopping, Amazon will kick back a couple of bucks to the podcast, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. There are no hidden fees or charges. You can buy whatever you're planning on buying and help out the podcast in the process. You can find my Amazon links by going to podcast1.com, click on the Killer Deals button in the top right corner of the page, and then hit the Steve Austin Show button and go to shopping. I ain't telling you to buy nothing you don't need. I don't want a handout. We have an agreement with Amazon, and they kick back a couple of bucks for us to pay our production costs, and that's how we keep this show on the air for free. Find my Amazon links and all my sponsors, everything Steve Austin Show related, by clicking the buttons I told you to click. If you bookmark that thing, you can find it in one click. Save yourself a lot of headaches and hassles. Go to shopping, help support the show. Hey, folks, keep listening, because the 60-second AP News headlines are coming up next. And until next time, I'm coming back with an OMCF for Thursday. My name is Steve Austin, and I will catch your ass down the road.
Download new episodes of The Steve Austin Show every Tuesday at podcastone.com. That's podcastone.com.
I want to say thank you to Drop Stop, one of the great sponsors of this show. Drop Stop is the original patented seat gap filler, as seen on TV's Shark Tank. Get the original Drop Stop at buydropstop.com and use code STEVE for 2 free gifts and free shipping. Stay tuned for the latest AP News headlines from Podcast One right after this.
When shopping for car insurance, consider this. Geico has been saving people money on car insurance for over 75 years. So if you're serious about savings, it's simple. Go to geico.com. After 75 years, they know how to save you money.
AP Update, I'm Ross Simpson.
I see your true colors shine.
The Orlando Gay Chorus sang at a candlelight vigil tonight for the 49 people killed and 53 others wounded at a gay nightclub in the city early Sunday morning.
We are here to say that love will overcome in Orlando, Florida, because that's who this community is. And we stand together.
Brian Fullwider with the Interfaith Council of Central Florida says the city will heal.
Our love and prayers are with all of those family members who have lost loved ones, with everyone who has a family member laying in the hospital right now, and our prayers are for recovery and for healing.
President Obama will travel to Orlando on Thursday to pay respects to the victims of the nightclub shooting and to stand in solidarity with the community as it embarks on recovery. AP Update, I'm Ross Simpson.